Okay, this is rather terrifying, talking to so many people from around the different parts of the world. Well, good afternoon, everyone who's here. It's lovely to see you. Welcome to webinar 3 in this really important series. We are happy to have you here, and now that we have all started to get to know each other, already the chat is lighting up, and hopefully we will engage in some really interesting discussions. I think particularly around this presentation, it has some really interesting aspects that we will all learn from. Before we start the session, if you're here to listen to Professor Lay speak, please make sure you're on mute. Please don't be offended if you are accidentally off mute and I come along and mute you as one of the co-hosts. It's just we're all from so many different countries, it does get kind of messy at times. If you're having connection issues, please feel free to turn off your camera and to use the chat function as much as you would like. And I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country. This is an important event, and this is a really important acknowledgement. The Australian-ASEAN Academics Forum, Online Education During COVID-19 and Beyond, acknowledges the traditional owners of the land where this program was developed, the Palawa people of the Lutruwita nations. We pay respect to the traditional owners and to elders past, present, emerging of the land on which all of the Tasmanian campuses stand. On behalf of the University of Tasmania, we acknowledge all countries participating in this forum and also acknowledge their elders and ancestors and their legacy to us. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where our partners and participants live and work across Australia and across Southeast Asia. Our university has a particular commitment to place, and so those words have a lot of meaning for us, and our work in the university is around building a much better understanding of Indigenous knowledges around the world and in Tasmania, and incorporating those into the work that our students do. So we take that acknowledgement really seriously. Now, where am I? Excuse me, I'm just choking. So today we are really lucky to have a presentation by Professor Fay from the Australian Maritime Institute. He's going to speak for a while, sharing his screen, and then he's going to stop and he's going to allow for questions along the way. So he may do that 1 or 2 times, and at the end we'll have time for questions, comments, maybe more in-depth discussion. We'll have around 30 minutes for that. But also, as the discussion goes along and as the presentation goes along, please feel absolutely free to use the chat function to use questions. We'll monitor and come back to those when we get a moment. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the first speaker from the University of Tasmania in this series, Associate Professor Fay from the Australian Maritime College. Now, he has had a vast experience and huge success. He received his PhD with a focus on business management in 2009 from the Australian Maritime College. And since then, he's developed a world-class reputation as a researcher, teacher, and supervisor. And importantly for this event, he has been at the forefront of online delivery and innovative practices for a number of years. And before completing his PhD, Dr. Fay completed a Bachelor of Engineering and a Master's in Business Administration. He has 2 main areas of research expertise, and they're both fascinating. One is in logistics and supply chain management, and including something that became really relevant during COVID-19 in food supply chains. The other research focus he follows is the human capital development in the maritime industry. And he looks at issues specifically related to maritime engineering and education and training, demand and supply, and safety related to human factors. His research has been supported over a number of years by really significant funding success. He has amassed a funding total of coming up towards $4 million, and they have supported his research into these really interesting and important areas. He also not only is an amazing teacher and researcher, but he has significant industry experience, which lends a particular authenticity to his academic roles. He's worked in the shipping industry and in logistics, and this practical knowledge works its way into how he works with students and his really extensive knowledge base. So it is with absolutely great pleasure that I welcome Professor Fay to this event as our speaker, and I will now hand over to his excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Carrington, for your very kind introduction. And thank you for Dr. Vin too for inviting me for this forum. And this is a fantastic opportunity for Australia between University of Tasmania and also the ASEAN countries to share our experience in online education and our experience during the pandemic, and probably some thoughts post the COVID-19 era. I'll just share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see now.
Okay, thank you. So my presentation is online education and a question about whether this is an emergent responses to the COVID-19 or a necessity. We are at the Australia Maritime College, and the Maritime College is the Australia National Institute for Maritime Education, Training and Research. Now we provide the programs right from Certificate 1 at vocational education training level, right to PhD level and everything in between. So we're very unique compared to other parts of the university. At the Australia Maritime College, we have two national centers with 4 very different discipline areas. And I'm going to share my experience of our online education prior to the COVID-19 and thoughts in the post-COVID-19. Now, our first national center is for the ports and the shipping. In this national center, we have 3 discipline areas. The first one is the maritime business and international logistics. In this discipline, in this department, we have distance education, and we started actually in the middle of 1990s. So we had many years. We have had many years of distance education. I'll try not to call online education because over 20 years ago, we didn't have that sort of online platform. But we started the distance education in the middle of 1990s. And also we have roughly about 50% of international students in our student cohort in this discipline. And many international students will study by distance. And they're truly distance students, not just students because they are located interstate somewhere in Australia. We have over 20 different nationalities of students in our programs. And we have both undergraduate program and also postgraduate program. And we started our sort of online journey roughly about 2010. So far we got over 10 years of experience. And then the second part is the ocean seafaring, which is very different. I actually come from a seafaring background. I worked on ships in the shipping industry for 10 years. This is a very different discipline in the sense that we actually have, in addition to the higher education compliance, we also have to comply with external regulatory bodies. In Australia, we're called Australia Maritime Safety Authority. So what we do actually not just to comply with the higher ed, quality assurance system, for example, we need to actually comply with the regulation externally. And this actually has some implication on how we actually conduct on our online education. And also we have about 40 international students in that discipline. And the online presence from that discipline actually started roughly about 2016. So it's less than 5 years of experience. Then we have the coastal seafaring, that's the VET sector, vocational education and training. Majority domestic students, and the online education experience, once again, very limited, very limited. And then we have the second National Center for Maritime Engineering and Hydrodynamics. We have about 80% of international students in the postgraduate program, and then 80% domestic students in the undergraduate program. And this center with 2 programs requiring lots of lab exercise and lots of teaching, obviously, in classrooms. And also we have the accreditation, external accreditation, which is the Engineers Australia. And once again, we needed to actually meet the requirements both ends. The online experience of that area started from roughly about 2015, so 5 years experience. So with this background, I'll explain to you about the pre-COVID-19 online education versus the post or during the COVID-19 online education. So with the first one, the maritime and the logistics management area, before the COVID-19, we had the fully online content. So I'll explain later on. It's not just the content. We have pretty much a fully online design because we have to deliver both to campus and also distance students. And the delivery, as indicated here, is blended. So we have the classroom teaching plus recording of whatever happening in the classroom, including tutorial sessions, and then uploaded and made available to students doing distance. Engagement, once again, blended, which means we have in-classroom engagement plus the online platform engagement. Assessment, we have fully online for the coursework, but for the exam, we have 2 different actually format. One is the sit exam, that's sort of in the classroom and invigilated. Then we have for distance students, take-home exam. We have different design, but make sure the equivalence between the 2 cohorts. For ocean seafaring, very different picture, very limited content online pre-COVID-19, and the vast or almost all the activity happening in the classroom, engagement classroom, and assessment only quizzes. Some of the quizzes actually made available online and completed by students online. And obviously, all the exams invigilated, the sit exam. Same for the VET sector. And even they did not even have any online assessment at all. For the National Center for the Maritime Engineering, once again, limited content because they very much rely on textbooks and very limited content online. Classroom delivery and engagement mainly only through the classroom, once again, tutorial sessions, workshops, or lab activities, and they have simulations as well. In terms of assessment, they have mainly classroom-based assessments, but with some quizzes online. Now, I have to mention also the MOM, Maritime Logistics and Management area. It's not just the assessment online, available online. The marking actually occurred also online, and including online gradebook, etc., fully online. So as you can imagine, as the when the time came, we had to actually respond to COVID-19 and the consequent campus closure. The maritime and the logistics management area had very little impact. So what actually needed or had to be changed was just the exam for the distance students. So it's pretty much we use the take-home exam for distance students and use the same format, exactly same assessment for our on-campus students. So we removed invigilated exam altogether and very smoothly. And of course, we actually have done quite a lot in terms of the delivery engagement. I'll explain later on. It's not just say, well, because we've been doing this all the time, so we don't need to actually make any changes at all. It's just the capacity already being developed. And that wasn't so much a surprise when we had to actually respond. But lots of work in that period actually being done to improve the delivery, synchronous and asynchronous delivery, and also the engagement. For ocean seafaring, lots of work, and all the contents, wherever possible, moved online, but at different level as compared to what actually happened in the MLM area, because moving content online could be just upload a PDF document. But wherever possible, content being moved online, and delivery became fully online. Engagement, well, had to be fully online. Assessment, fully online, but in different way. Now, compared to maritime logistics and maritime management, we have the Australia Maritime Safety Authority, the requirement to have invigilated exam. So what we did was actually have online invigilated exam. So once again, that was an innovation, but it's still online. It's just online invigilated. For the vet sector, contents, some moved online, but still many of those just simply could not be moved online because there were so many practicals which not possible to be done online. And delivery, a mix of those. And the innovation actually was to deliver whatever the content possibly could be moved online and done through remotely by students. And because the majority of students in that area are domestic students. So that actually created a sort of new form of a delivery to students where they can complete all the content at home. They don't need to actually travel to AMC because majority of students interstate. We have very small number of students actually from Tasmania. So this actually saved a lot of time and probably cost to students. They completed content online and then only came to the campus to complete practicals and then the exams. Engagement was obviously, as far as the content delivery concerned, there was some online sort of form of engagement, but also the other part is on campus when the campus actually opened or reopened. Assessment, limited online assessment, online assessment. For the maritime engineering, content online still limited, simply because the discipline is like this, as I explained. Students have textbooks, and online part is just those sessions, tutorial sessions, probably recorded, or some pre-recorded lectures loaded online. And the delivery, fully online, of course, both synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous delivery sessions, live sessions, and we're still doing this. Live sessions for on-campus and distance students. This year, we had the first semester we had some students, or in fact the majority of students on campus, but we still had international students, so we actually deliver at the same time to in-classroom students and also students online. Engagement, fully online, and also assessment, fully online. Now, that, as I'll explain later on, online, yes, fully online, because that's, otherwise we have to delay those. And the external accreditation body actually doesn't require invigilated exam as the case for ocean seafaring. But some feedback indicate this might be just a compromise. Although yes, assessed, done, take home, but might be a compromise. I'll explain why this is the case. So online presence. Yes, when we say we have online presence, but the level of online presence varies significantly from just the PDF loaded in the online space to the learning management system, to very much interactive web page design, and then we have anything in between. So varying level of online content. In terms of delivery, a mixed use of pre-recording, live sessions, and we use Zoom or web conferencing. Web conferencing is a program embedded in our learning management system, while Zoom is an external application. We use actual mix of those. Now, best practice in delivery, we provided pre-recording of fundamental knowledge or fundamental content. So the content part pre-recorded obviously using PowerPoint slides. But then we also have live session mainly focusing on problem solving and discussions, questions, discussions, group works. So the online session is very different from the pre-recorded lecture normally. And the students are comfortable with either Zoom or web conferencing. And there are lots of details there, obviously. When you're using the two different programs, they are different because one is embedded in our system, university system, and the other one is external. So in terms of how we actually provide later on the recorded sessions, there will be some work. In terms of engagement, once again, the level of engagement, very different. So I have the peer-to-peer engagement and also the lecture and students engagement. So peer-to-peer engagement, well, ranging from very limited engagement, which means, well, it's not purposely designed. It's just say, well, if it happens, okay, well, let it happen. If not, well, not much can be done. And then we have the other end, very much designed, monitored, and assessed engagement activities. So this is on the other end of the engagement level. So some of those units or the discipline areas will have very good design to actually encourage, facilitate engagement and monitor engagement. And some of those engagement activities even being assessed. So students actually have to complete or have to engage. And then we have the assessment part. Now, assessment can be designed fit for purpose. That's the good part. In the case of the maritime logistics and management. So in that area, designed for the purpose and not much of a problem. But then assessment kind of just a compromise between what should be done or what is ideal versus what can be done. So with the campus closure and lots of students actually overseas because they can't actually travel back because of the border restriction. So for the maritime engineering, for example, the change to the assessment to take home, yes, it's being done, but it may be a compromise in the sense that lecturers and the students both actually doubt about the actual assessment, the authenticity of the assessment and the integrity of the assessment. And also the question of what we're actually assessing students. Are we assessing students' fundamental knowledge? Can this be done open book? So this also eventually comes to a question about what kind of engineers we are training. So it's a question about whether it's possible to actually redesign the assessment so that we have the integrity in the assessment. And in fact, we're assessing the real attainment of students' learning outcome. So a range of questions there. For seafaring, some of those exams can be done or were done through the online invigilated exam, but some exams simply could not be done, so being delayed. And once again, it's common across different areas within the university. Now, this mainly because we have to comply with external professional accreditation bodies or other authorities, and therefore requirements to have certain form of assessment. And obviously, some of those assessments simply can only be completed in lab or using the facility or equipment on campus. So we had many challenges when we're actually moving online to respond the campus closure. The first one, time and resources. The time was very limited and it was very urgent because it was an emergent response. And then we had a very limited time to actually move things online and to plan the delivery and the rest of it, engagement, assessment, the rest of it. And the resource issue. We obviously require support, and where the resources are from. And then the next question is, what kind of standards had to be followed, and the consistency across different units within a discipline, or any consistency actually across different discipline areas. Because people did different things and had different preferences, and the students sometimes got confused. Just when using the two applications, Zoom or web conferencing, sometimes students got confused because they studying a program and different units actually were delivered in a very different way. So the standards and the consistency. And then the digital literacy of students and academic staff. Well, we obviously in our programs, we have students like those really young ones. They're very much sort of familiar with the technology. Digital literacy, not a problem, but at the same time, we have students very much sort of mature age students, and they probably haven't actually done any study in the last 20 years, and they just came to campus for degree, for a program to upskill in the area, and they're not necessarily familiar with the technology or the digital literacy required for them to complete their study fully online. And also, the same thing is true for academic staff. Even now, still, it's a learning process. It's a learning process. So lots of academic staff actually required high level of support, required a very high level of support. All aspects of the online education, from content, moving content to online, to designing a quiz, to designing the exam, etc., required significant assistance from the university. And then the assessment design, once again, it's not just simply just moving things online. It doesn't work that way. Certainly doesn't work that way. Between the city exam and the take-home exam, the whole thing had to be redesigned, And then those practical. In the seafaring, ocean seafaring, and the maritime engineering, students actually have to use labs and workshops to complete the practical side of it. And once again, it's a requirement from external body, especially for ocean seafaring. So it's been challenging time, very, very challenging time. So with all those challenges, there are obviously lots of other challenges. I'll just listed these here. These are could possibly include. But again, when we're looking back, well, we were able to actually transit in a short period of time, and with a good success level, I would say. There were certain factors that I believe made the transition successful. The first one, and probably most important one, commitment of all levels within the university. And the university provides resources and support through each college. Now, at the University of Tasmania, we already have the learning management system for many, many years. And this is essential for us actually moving online. Without this, would not be possible. And then moving content online. I mentioned in the previous slide about the standards and the consistency. And the college actually, through the college, a template was actually provided to teaching staff. They could use, and relatively straightforward and with limited effort, moving content into the template so that the content actually presented online in a good way and consistent. In terms of assessment redesign, we had support from the college, the academic development team. That's what we call them. A team of the professional providing support to different areas, not just the assessment redesign, but also the design of online content. How do we present? And then the college also provided workshops for teaching staff, taking through people, for example, how to actually set up a quiz in the online space. So workshops, many workshops being held during that period of time. And then online resources for both students and the staff. So UTAS provides very, very good resources online for students and teaching staff, how to use learning management system and how to design or for students how to actually access or how to utilize the online resources. So that's sort of the university level and through the college. And then we have the willingness of teaching staff. A can-do attitude was very, very important because, well, yes, that was a necessity. We had to respond. But to what level we can achieve? Well, that was actually a matter of how all the teaching staff react to the requirement and how much effort each one actually put into it. And then we had lots of innovations actually out of it. It's not simply, it wasn't just simply, well, it was an emergent response, but instead, lots of innovation and thinking outside of the box. Well, I had actually lots of examples which are new because they contacted me about what they were doing or they were thinking to do. So thinking outside the box. So lots of things previously thought impossible became possible through this process. And also community of practice to share experience because each one had different experience, had different ideas, learned different things, and it was very important for people actually to share. And in fact, we had many sessions of informal, formal experience sharing within the Australia Maritime College. It wasn't just within a discipline, but also cross-discipline. And also, people talked about their successful stories. It could be a very small thing. It could be very small thing. It could be overall designing something. And then we had the best practices. And also another important area was student feedback. Now we had meetings, formal, informal sessions with students from earlier stage of the transition online. So we continuously collected feedback from students in relation to how they felt about the online experience. So wherever possible, we improve, we adjust, and with the resources we had to improve the content, improve student experience online. And also part of that, of course, not necessarily directly related to their studies, but rather their own experience, their feeling of isolation, for example, their morale during their studies. So we had course coordinators and unit coordinators. Sometimes we call the students just to make sure they were all right. And also indicating them that the support is always there and teaching staff a willingness to provide support and help when needed. So the second area of, or second factor, success factor is engagement. Now, in the online environment, very different because we couldn't see students. Physically, students couldn't see each other. Students couldn't see their lecture. And it was very challenging to be engaged. So engagement started from the content. So it wasn't just a matter of moving things online or take the learning management system as a repository. No, it doesn't work that way. When students during their study alone, students needed to know why they're doing this. So we needed to tell students the relevance of the content or a learning activity to the subject, or the relevance of that particular learning activity to assessment and the application part. Now that part actually designed in the online environment. And then what to achieve. So students needed to know, well, after they finish the learning activities, well, what to achieve. So we present or explain very clearly the learning outcomes need to be achieved. Now, this is not the unit level learning outcomes, rather each week. When we gave students learning activities, content for them to go through or certain articles for them to read, we told them, say, well, thought points, three areas you have to, well, you need to achieve after you finish all those. And then we also told the students the steps. How are you going to achieve those? So we told the students, this is the first step. Complete this part first. You got those questions to answer when you look at this. So step by step, very, very clear. So it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap. It's not just a content, present online, off you go, you finish it, done. And then we have the engagement with their peer students. So that was actually achieved through live session, obviously, synchronous live session. Wherever possible, we encouraged students to participate, to attend. But just as otherwise in classroom sessions, you always have students who don't attend, regardless. But it's more obviously more challenging in an online environment. So what we did was we provided all the information about online sessions, obviously, and remind the students of the online live sessions to all students. The attendance overall was very encouraging, in fact. And we had the students, because of the time zone, we started, for example, I had a unit started 9 o'clock in the morning, a postgraduate unit. I had students from Australia, and I had students from India. I had students from Middle East. So when I started 9 o'clock in the morning, some students in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning probably, because we had the European students as well. So it was very encouraging. Students actually attended the class, the live sessions. And then we had the online forum. So that's the asynchronous engagement or communication. We designed a forum for students to interact with each other. So later on, in the second half of this presentation, I'll show you what that means or what we have done. And then the motivation, we encourage students. We encourage students, this is a difficult time, we're all in and we work together. So show the support and work together. And then the engagement with lecture, regular communication with the students. So just to show students that the lecture is always there. The teaching staff always there to support and to show that we are available to help and willing to help. And this is once again, very important for students for their moral and for their willingness to engage. Monitoring. So with all those things happening or we have done, we needed to know what's happening with the student side. So we use analytics provided by the learning management system to monitor student engagement with content, their completion of assessment, the interaction, and the study progress. So I'll use example to explain the monitoring in the second half. So I'll just stop here just for a few minutes, just in case if you want to ask any questions.
Well, thank you for a really interesting and compelling talk so far. I'm really looking forward to the next part. We have a number of questions in the chat room. I'm wondering if we could invite some people to unmute and ask their question. The first one we've got is from, I'm sorry about how I'm going to say your name, Li Wan Hui, to ask a question of Professor Fei, sorry. Are you still here? Nope. Okay. The question was to know more about assessing online, the kind of different ways that you utilized engagement and the things you did to assess students, things like mini tasks, assignments, presentations, reports. I think this person is looking for some concrete examples of the things that could do online to assess students, if that's clear.
Okay. One example I probably can give here is for online discussion for assessment. So it's kind of one stone kills two birds. We design assessment, a task. We provided the students number of topics and separate students into groups. And with that particular question, students had to actually come up with their own viewpoints. And this is a statement, the original contribution, as we're called. They had to actually make their own judgment towards that particular question in that group. And the second part, once the students completed the first part, the second part, students actually could view all the posts in the online space, and then they had to actually comment on others' viewpoints and with justification. So that's the sort of a design where actually the assessment occurred online, but also encouraged the students to engage, to interact with each other.
Thank you. I'm just so impressed by the amount of detailed planning and reflection that you and your colleagues put into this. It certainly wasn't a case of throw everything online. It's just fascinating. Now we have a question from Swasti Wulan, who I can see in the chat window. Would you like to unmute and ask your question, Swasti?
I'm sorry, I have trouble with my signal, so I just...
We can hear you really well at the moment.
Oh, okay. As I written in the chat box, what do you think if an institution make or build like a production team to help teachers or lecturers to make a good material for teaching, like a video or animation maybe, so the teacher can focus on the content, but other people help them to make a good material, because not all of the teacher, I think, that have skills to make a good video. What do you think? Is it okay? Is it a law, or what do you think? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I'll probably put it this way. If the task or the idea is or requires significant input, and with the idea proposal from the teaching staff, and then requires the support from academic development team or other professional assistants. But also, I wanted to make that point. Majority of those things needed to be initiated from the teaching staff, because the teaching staff know the best of what needed and how should it be done.
Yes.
So it's not necessary all the time we needed to actually design or develop something from the scratch. The open there are lots of open resources we can tap into. And this is part of the online design, in fact, in the content. So in almost all the units within the maritime and the logistics management area, we utilize open resources, multimedia, or videos from YouTube, for example, when relevant. And you'll be surprised how much you found from open resources. And that's when we actually provide a link to the content area. Students just one-stop kind of shopping. They just reading from that same page, and the hyperlinks provided. So they do everything in the learning management system, but as I said, needed to be initiated from the teaching staff. And when needed, asking support from the university. And we're fortunate enough that we have fantastic support from the university through the colleges.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Yeah, we have dedicated units, but as Professor Lay was saying, you have to know what you want and the pedagogic reason for it. They don't do that for you. It was a really good question. We have another assessment question from Aldafina. Would you like to ask your question?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Harrington.
You are so lovely.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Well, my name is Adolfina Krisifu. You can just call me Fin. I'm from Indonesia, from Cendrawasih University in Papua. Okay, my question is about, my concern is about assessment, especially for individual students practicum. Okay, this is a bit hard for me. I mean, to do assessment for online, especially for synchronous online learning. If you, Prof. Faye, if you have an experience on this and how to deal with the assessment, and perhaps you may share your sample rubrics to do the assessment for students practicum. So because this is a part of assessment on the practicum, so that's why I want to know more about this. Thank you, Prof. Faye.
Thank you. For the assessment, the essential part of that design, assessment design, is the question about whether we are assessing or how do we assess students' learning outcomes. So the first thing we needed to be very clear is what are the learning outcomes of students. And once we know clearly about learning outcomes, we start designing how do we assess them. So there are a number of questions. The first one is the authenticity of it, whether we are truly assessing students' achievement or attainment of the learning outcomes. And the second part is the integrity. Because in online environment, if this is not invigilated, how do we know the students actually doing the job, not someone else? So this comes to a range of things that, well, the first thing is obviously we don't design something student can easily Google and find the answer for. Now, this must be very much in the context and it's applied. And that's exactly what we needed to do in the higher education. It's not just because in this environment. We needed to, we deliver the fundamental knowledge, but what students needed to do is to find how to apply what they have learned. So we provide cases. So it's context-based. Student can't just find the answer from Google. They need to come up with their understanding of that particular context or a case before they can come up with the answer. So that's just sort of one of those things we actually have to do. And the practical part, if the assessment of the practical rely on certain equipment or facility, then it's difficult. But this is probably a discussion we can have for future when we use education technology, for example, VR and AR. Now, we at the Australia Maritime College, we actually already started using this. So in a virtual reality, we design those things. People don't necessarily need to be in a simulation room. They don't need to be physically there, but they through the virtual reality, they can actually experience, they can actually touch on those buttons and they will see the result to operate a machine engine, for example. And also, there is an area where we're actually been planning, depending on the resources we have requires obviously investment. For example, for the engineering space, we have those labs normally operated physically by students, but can be done remotely. So with the software and with robots, we can actually remotely operate those equipment in a lab. And by doing this, we can actually we can complete assessment for practicals if those equipment or facility, physical equipment or facility required. But that's sort of a discussion probably for moving forward and what we can achieve.
I'm very aware of time ticking by. We have another couple of questions on assessment. There's a theme coming through here. But we might go on to the second half of your talk and then come back to these questions to make sure you get your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the second part, I'll give you an example of monitoring students' learning, their progress, and how do we actually create that digital connections in the online space. So in our learning management system, the university actually provides, we have a function called intelligent agents. So it's just one of many functions available in the learning management system. So I'll explain how I actually used it for a range of things. So I'll explain the digital connection and what I have done and what being achieved, and I'll give you some evidence of what I have claimed. So digital connections in this context, it's about student engagement with online content. Well, we have invested our time, lots of efforts, and probably financially. But then we wanted to know if students actually utilizing those resources at all. And then we need to look at the peer interactions through the discussion forum, because we created those virtual space, but we want to know how students actually interacting with each other. And also students' interactions with lecture, either by email, online, or other forms, and student engagement in e-activities. So this is something probably a little bit too small, but I'll explain. Now, what I put here actually is something we all as teaching staff can actually pull out from the learning management system without needing any assistance from someone else, because it's there. You just needed to understand how to actually pull it out. So for the left part, I'll have the class list, all the students. I'll remove the student's name for privacy. And then you can see the bars on the right end, and that's their login activities. I can sort of zoom in to see a particular student, the student's progress summary. As you can see from the grades, objectives, the content, the discussion, assignment, the quizzes, etc. And then I can zoom in further to see the actual unit access activities. Well, on which day the student actually accessed to the unit and look at something, and the login history, etc. So I can see everything there. And then the student forum, I'll explain the sort of the discussion forum. If you look at just, I'll actually have other forums as well, not just this. I'll put the first thing, introduce yourself online. You see, 92 posts. Now in that class, I think I had about 30 something students. So as you imagine, well, on average, each student actually posted 3 times at least. And then module discussion, because that was sort of extracted just during the semester. So by that time, module discussion, because that unit has 12 modules, 1 module each week. So students actually put things for module discussion. So they had questions and the students actually helped each other. Well, sometimes I got into it. Sometimes I just left the students to actually help them each other, because we had students, school leavers, we had students been working in the industry for 20 years. So they helped each other and they interacted with each other very well. And about assignment, I put things there. Sometimes I got involved. Sometimes I just left them to work their own. But with this, what did I do actually? I didn't just say, well, yes, I'll just check out those and finish. I got some idea. No, I actually utilize the analytics and utilize the intelligent agent as a function, and I'll put set up some monitoring small programs there. So as you can see, I have engagement, which means I can set up if a particular student hasn't engaged in the unit content or other activities in the last 5 days, an automatic but personalized email will be sent to that student. So dear the name, it's not dear student, it's dear the name. And then I'll put a message, a personal message there. So students receive that message, and then the student found, okay, well, my lecturer actually was monitoring me. I'll better to do something. So that's about engagement. And I also have, say, high achievement assessment and lower sort of achievement, whatever. I'll send a message out to students. Now, this is actually automatically done. I actually didn't actually check each student, and especially if you had a couple of hundred students in the classroom, this is basically virtually impossible task. Now, all these were actually automatically done through the system. What I did was just set it up. So as you can see from the right side, I could set up for anything. I could set up something about the assignment submission, about the score, about checklist, the learning activities are put there, whether a particular student already completed it or not, whether submission being late. If late, a message once again be sent to the students. Everything automatic. The outcome. So what is the outcome? After I have done all those, increase the student engagement online, because I'll check the data analytics. And also, the easier way was to check the first week when I ran the engagement message. I'll probably find, okay, well, 6 or 10 students met that requirement, which means 10 students in the last 5 days or whatever days you set up, you put there, hadn't actually engaged online. And the next week I ran it again. Well, it reduced to only 5. And the next run again, probably only a couple of them. So students actually started engaging online. So that reflected from the number of students not engaging in unit or in terms of content completion, and increased the peer-to-peer interactions as reflected from the discussion forum. And also, students contacted me when they had problems or they requested certain help or whatever. And also, students increased the students' awareness of their own learning progress, because they received my message about their performance in a particular assessment or learning activity. And many of those students actually came to me, said, well, yes, I got your message, and that's what happened, so whatever. So increase the awareness of the learning progress. And then I have some evidence. Well, when I say, well, it's increased, improved, and this the evidence. I received lots of emails actually, in fact, from students. Now this is the first one was a student working full time in the industry, and he said, "Well, thanks for your email. You have been I have been very busy here at the port." He worked in the port with the lockdown, mainly dealing with a bigger project, and spending lots of time with the lawyer, but doing readings, etc. So, basically telling me what happened, And I got just sort of 3 emails. Part of the emails I received from 3 students. That I got lots of those emails. That was when students received that automatic message. But to each student, that message was unique. And in similar way, I encourage students, or I say congratulate students when they achieved high scores. And once again, automatic messages sent out to students. And sometimes you'll be surprised how actually students appreciate our acknowledgement of their achievements. So once again, it's very important. It's very important. It's not just in an online sort of environment, but in the normal environment, it's very important. We acknowledge, we celebrate their achievements. So with this, our thoughts on online education in a post-COVID-19 era. Now, is online education the future of education? Some people argue that yes, that's the future. The argument for this is because of the flexibility it provides. Students can do their study at a time really convenient to them, because we have students, with family or work commitment, and also accessibility. We have students working in the Navy, and for those seafarers, they're on ships. But it doesn't matter. With online education, they can do their study anywhere, and then customize the learning experience, because they can design their own pace, their own way of study, and it's cost effective because they don't need to travel. They save their accommodation on campus. They can live there with their family. So all those benefits. But we have other things to consider. So depending on what kind of student cohorts. For us, we have student cohorts including school leavers, but also those mature age students with full-time work commitment and with their family. So the needs of those people are different. For some students, they prefer, say, well, I want an on-campus study because I paid for it, because I want a university life. It's not just a study. I want to experience university as a life, a part of my life. So we all need to consider those. The learning experience and the outcomes. What experience do we provide to students? Or what kind of learning experience and outcomes students want from us? And then the last area is the education technologies. What technologies available and can actually facilitate? So that's about big data analytics. So it's about the monitoring part, analysis, but also it can help us actually on marking, for example. Artificial intelligence, once again, there is an issue about assessment design and about the integrity of assessment. So if we leave students, give assessment to students and let them to compete by themselves off campus, we don't say them. We don't even have exam. Do we trust? Well, there is a way. We can use artificial intelligence to identify any abnormals when it comes to competing the assessment. So I'll actually experiment myself in terms of identifying any abnormal outcomes. So I design a small assessment, only 5 or 10 marks, and then large assessment with 20 or 30 marks. So students, if they wanted to have the assessment done by someone else, or in extreme case, they engage what we call contract cheating. They normally don't bother to have that 5 marks of assessment done by someone else. They do by themselves. So you have that pattern. And then when you read the second assessment, 30%, you find, oh, completely different. The way they write, they complete is completely different. So this is actually artificial intelligence, because we try to identify the pattern and identify difference, and we know what's happening. And then virtual reality or augmented reality that we can apply in our teaching. And this will certainly enhance student learning experience and make lots of things impossible at the moment possible in future. And thank you very much for your attention. And any questions?
Oh, wow. Where to start? I'm going to go back to the question that assessment does not go away in the stream of questions. Everyone is very interested in how you approach assessment, how you've made it sustainable, or all the different things. Is Andriana still here? Because this is an issue that has been identified here that comes up a lot.
Yes, I'm still here.
Please go with your question. It's a great question.
Okay, thank you for that, Professor Carrington. And yeah, actually, I've already written my question on the chat box there, so I'm just gonna read it if you don't mind. So yeah, Professor Faye, I don't know if you have experienced students who couldn't attend the online meeting and couldn't access the internet due to very, very poor internet connectivity. And as a result, they couldn't submit the assignments and couldn't take the exams. So I wonder if you have any suggestions to handle the problem for teachers like me. Even up to now, I've been experiencing that in my situation here in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a great question because we actually have had this sort of issue in the maritime and the logistics management area for quite a long time. And acknowledging that students in different countries and having different internet connection. And also we do have students actually working on ships offshore. We have Australia domestic students working in the Navy, for example, and with limited internet access. So what we've been doing is, well, the content part, we can actually, we provide right from, or not right from beginning of a semester. In fact, 2 weeks before the semester, we provide all those contents online. And also we provide all the assessment 2 weeks prior to the commencement of a semester. So giving staff enough time to actually to download whatever they need for their study. And also we are flexible in terms of the request for extension with justification, obviously. So this actually considers sometimes the difficulties in accessing online contents materials and also submitting assessments. So with more time, it's more likely students will find a time when they're able to get connected. But the key here is we provide ahead of the time and giving enough time for students. And the extension thing, once again, we have had that experience because we started a distance education a long time ago, 25 years ago. And we had to actually cater for students working full-time, and due to their work commitment, we sort of provide that flexibility for students to have more time to complete. Now, this is sometimes where people argue that, well, this might not be fair to others. Well, it's not the case. We look at what students needed to achieve, their learning outcomes, and still within that sort of overall semester period of time. But it's just the flexibility of submitting. Well, yes, more work to the lecture, but it's good for students. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Obviously, we can't provide that sort of internet connection for students, but we can actually, through a sort of a wider time window, they may be able to find a window where they can actually access. And also another thing I probably want to mention here is we stopped doing this now, but we did it before. We actually create digital resources. Basically, we actually collect all the digital resources in a USB and send the USB to students. So at one stage in the transition between sort of a distance education moving to fully online, we had a stage where we actually we even send the DVDs with everything on the DVD and send to students. And then we move to USB, everything on the USB. We created ebooks of units and then put the ebooks into the DVD or USB and physically sent to students. And it worked. At a different stage, all worked.
Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. Here in Tasmania, we don't have great internet access in some parts as well, because it's a very regional and remote area. And when COVID hit, all of the primary schools and secondary schools closed down. So all the students were working from home with their families. And it turned out that lots and lots of students didn't have laptops and lots didn't have internet access. So the state government was lending out laptops and sending dongles, and USBs with some of the digital content on. And in areas where they were even more remote, where they couldn't make that work, they actually printed out the content. So we were using a combination of high tech plus old technology to try and hold everybody together and keep them learning. So I think your question was really important, because that's always going to be an issue. Connectivity and access is always going to be a problem. Okay, so we've got another question from Sapto about the details of actually delivering this online, I think. Sapto, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Nice to meet you, Ms. Victoria.
Please feel free to ask your question of the professor.
Yes, thank you. Professor Wei, nice to meet you. I'd like to ask some question. Nice presentation, I think. When you talk about the liberalization synchronous, I think it need much time and student readiness. And then the online volume synchronous will be good or nice alternative for students. And then when we talk about motivation, will be built unconsciously and simultaneously when the lecturers show a fantastic presentation. And then about teaching and learning process, I think that we are aware of that students not only study but one subject, but many subjects in semester that students must study. About your subject, in my opinion, the learning of your subject need studying practically more than, yeah? So how do you convey the library, what is because of teaching one subject need a semester or 6 months, how do you simplify your lesson plan? This is my question, Mr. Fei. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Victoria.
If I took it correctly, we don't actually simplify the unit or the contents. We changed the form and redesigned student learning process. I'll put it this way. When it comes to students learning of multiple units, not necessarily just one unit, multiple units. For students it's probably it's a time management, I suppose, a time management issue. And believe it or not, within a disciplinary area, we actually work with each other within within a particular cohort. And normally we have full-time students actually enrolled in 4 units. What we do, we always, it's not just during COVID-19. We work as a team, say, well, for that 4 units, we have multiple assessments in each unit. And we work on the deadlines. We try not asking students to actually submit 3 assessments or 4 assessments in the same day or in the same week. We move across, so students actually can complete 1 in each week. Same as the exam, we give a period. Students have time to complete within a given period, a reasonable period for them. So it's important that it's at least within a discipline area, the teaching staff, academic staff needed to work as a team. And we always consider from student perspective, how they actually approach their study and what kind of workload we're giving them and what kind of time, or sometimes we need to understand the stress students have. So if we always consider the student success is the key to our teaching, then we have the perspective right. And when we do the things, we do it right. I'm not sure if I answered your question, sorry.
Thank you very much for that. It really seems that people are fired up and really interested in the work that you were doing around assessment. There are even more questions. Asapta, would you mind muting for us, please? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. A fantastic presentation, Mr. Pei. Thank you, Ms. Victoria, Ms.
Definitely. Where was I going with that? So yes, assessment is definitely the flavor of the month or day or moment. There's another question about adult learners here from Lou Putu Atini. Are you still here and would like to ask your question, or will I ask it for you?
Oh, yeah, I'm here, Professor Carrington. Thank you so much. Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Fay. It's a fantastic, presentation. It's really, I learned so much from your presentation. This is, the question is very related to Adriani questions, because in teaching adult learners, postgraduate students, master and doctorate program, we have a curriculum, and then we already plan ahead of all the assessment. But as a matter of fact, in the practice, the students come from all over Indonesia, and they have very different, different luck with connection, I have to say. So with the assessment that we already designed, then there is a possibility that they can't do that. For example, one of the assignments is to do a mini research on a special issue. And then because of the COVID-19, they really stuck inside of their home, and they also have very limited access to internet. So this is, I just wonder what's your suggestion for flexibility here, and also choices. Yeah, flexibility and choices for the assessment. Thank you so much, Professor Pei.
Okay, thank you. I'll probably take a more sort of a general approach when it comes to flexibility to assessment. Now, during the COVID-19, when we had to actually respond to it, and part of that was obviously assessment, because at the beginning or before the semester started, all the assessments already been designed. So the process was actually to check in each unit how the assessment could be redesigned. And there was a sort of a design process, and the design process wasn't just the sort of individual stuff. It was more a teamwork between the unit coordinator. In UTAS, we call unit coordinator, teaching staff, and the course coordinator. So look at the redesign of the assessment and making sure it's wherever possible, it's equivalent to the previous design and assessing students' learning outcomes. And there was a process of approval. So it's a quality assurance. So it's not just to say, well, yes, we are going to change it and we make it flexible. The previous design assessment would not be, couldn't be done. And therefore we required a different one. There was approval process in addition to the initial discussion and the design. So making sure that the redesigned assessments are equivalent to the previous one and assessing students' learning outcomes, and therefore it's also a quality assurance. So with a particular assessment, probably will be, I don't know if in your case, if you design assessment require access to probably to physical equipment or travel to collect a certain data or whatever, and with the travel restrictions, this would not be possible. Then it could be an alternative. Could be you design a scenario, a case study. So you design the case study instead of students actually having to go out. You use alternative to replace. So it's once again, it's very common for us to design those context-based scenarios for students actually to do, and without needing physically going somewhere. But of course, they're still different, but that probably something we could do.
Thank you very much for the great question and the great response. Now, I'm aware that we have 1 minute left. So I'm going to jump to my question, which is, are you going to continue with this online blended model that you've developed during COVID, or are you going to go back to the old way?
Great. I'll probably put it this way. For within the Australia Maritime College, for the maritime and logistics management, this will continue. Online education will improve, and we continuously improving the online education part. And the responses or what we have done overall in the Maritime College, it wasn't just to say the outcome from the online education. It was a change to thinking, to mindset. So although we probably not fully continue with the online education, because with the lifts on travel restrictions, we have more students on campus, and domestic students can travel interstate. So in maritime engineering, for example, we have 85% of students already on campus. So we'll change the way we do it. For example, one thing we will do is we still have the online component delivery. It's blended, but we actually flip the classroom. So we deliver the content part online, and the classroom, physical classroom session will be, as I said, problem solving, discussion, group work, applications. So we'll enhance the student experience, in fact, but we're not going back to what it was.
Brilliant. And what is so clear from your presentation is that you and your colleagues took this challenge and you used it to rethink how you approach the learning of students, how you approach the pedagogy, how you understood engagement in different ways. It's so thoughtful and reflective, and it's such a powerful model. I'm going to take away from this one quote from you early on, and you said, things that were impossible became possible. And I think that's what I'm going to take away from you. It's really hard to change the way that you approach and think things after you've been doing them for a while, but you've really changed things around, and I want to bring that into my school. It's so impressive. So on behalf of everyone, I'm going to call time because people are starting to leave. They have other commitments. Professor Fay, thank you so much for being our speaker this evening. And it's been an amazing talk. I think it's been life-changing for me, at least, running the School of Education. And I would like to end with those thanks and a reminder that tomorrow's session, webinar 4, is Dr. Bill Baker, who's from the School of Education, who's presenting some of his research around the use of mobile phone technologies, which is entirely different and yet utterly amazing and innovative. So we hope to see you all again tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, Professor Fay, for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Once again, thank you for orchestrating this. You are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.